Good morning, dolls, and welcome to Little Gretchen's workshop. So, dolls, I had originally cut all these popsicle sticks to cover the floor of the attic of Miss Betty and Pop's new house, but I had to borrow a few to make a floor for the children's reading room. Now, dolls, here's my almost completed floor, and I do make them on brown paper bag templates, and I will leave a link in the description so you can see how I create my floors, but I'm taking the weights off of it. It's dry and it's nice and flat. Now, on some of my previous floors, I add wood putty to fill in the gaps, but I'm not going to do that on this floor, and I'm not going to sand it either. Some of my previous floors I did sand them, but I don't think it's necessary based on the way it feels. The surface is pretty smooth, it's flat. I laid the sticks reasonably straight, so I don't think the sanding is necessary for this floor. And the one nice thing about creating your floors on a paper bag template is it's flexible and easy to install, and it's much more convenient to create it at my desk than piece by piece in front of the dollhouse. Now, dolls, in many of my other videos for my flooring, I really do like dark stain, but in this case, I'm going to apply it a lot lighter than I normally do because the wallpaper in the reading room is pretty dark. So that's one of those things you'll need to consider when you're choosing the flooring and the wall colors. So while that first coat of the stain is drying, I'm going to go ahead and make my little heat registers. Now, these are some wonderful metal pieces that I received as a gift, and I've been thinking about how to use them ever since I got them. And this is the perfect opportunity. I want to make like little heat returns or heat registers, and I'm going to use them to camouflage or cover up the screws from the hinges in the ceiling of the dollhouse. So I simply cut 4 pieces of birchwood coffee stir stick and created a really shallow box, and I made it slightly smaller than the little metal piece so it would fit under it. And you can see from the underside how it looks. Now I'm going to allow that to dry before I paint or stain it, but I think it turned out pretty cute. Now there's a key component or piece of furniture that I really wanted for the reading room, and I didn't have the size and shape that I wanted, so I realized I would have to make it. So I grabbed a couple super jumbo craft sticks and started to play around with the idea or the concept. Now I started out by gluing 3 panels together, and I'm weighting them down because I'm trying to get them to dry flat and flush. Sometimes the jumbo craft sticks are a little bit bowed, so you have to work with them. Now, I don't know if you all can tell what I'm trying to make, but I'm trying to come up with a concept for a low-profile bookcase. Now, dolls, I do think it is a very good idea and a best practice to sketch out your things before you start cutting and building. Now, this is a lovely desk that was just gifted to me, and I will leave a link in the description so you can see when I received it. I really love that the desk is open on both sides so I can add chairs both ways. And dolls, I know my little bookshelf isn't finished, but I really just needed to bring it in here and check it for sizing as far as the walk area. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't making it too big or wide. Now at this point I had added 2 shelves, which was simply 2 of the jumbo craft sticks cut a little bit shorter than the base part and glued inside. Now you do want to use something to make sure they're square. Now, I should have been using my little Lego blocks to help me keep everything in alignment. I was eyeballing everything today, dolls, so you have to pardon me. Now, here I am playing around with the concept of some dividers, and I'm simply using some shortcuts or remnant pieces from the jumbo craft sticks. And it turned out that these little pieces were just the right size. Now that I'm done with the case itself, I wanted to make a top. Now this was made with a scrap piece of 1/16 inch basswood, but I did cut the corner off and rounded it. Now you definitely want to sand this until it's smooth, and you want to make both sides as even as possible to make them uniform. And the rounded corners are necessary for the children's safety. And now that it's all sanded and sized, I think it looks really cute. It fits on there very well, and it's going to extend just enough to make it look finished. Now this next frame, I was actually kind of jumping ahead of myself because I actually should have done a couple other things before I decided to add the glue. I probably should have stained the top before I glued it on, but dolls, I just forged ahead because I was excited about getting it done. Now this is a perfect example of why I urge you, dolls, not to rush ahead because you forget steps. Now, although I was kind of winging it and eyeballing everything, I did realize that I needed to do a little camouflage work to cover up some of the inconsistencies in my initial build. So as a camouflage, I wanted to create a slight border around the sides, and the border is going to serve two purposes. It's going to camouflage that the case is not square, and it's going to look decorative. Now this is simply some of my birch wood coffee stir sticks, and I'm cutting 4 of them to the size of the height of my bookcase. Now, dolls, don't be concerned about the Gorilla Wood glue. It kind of has a long drying time, so it's not going to dry up before I finish this out. So I'm just going ahead and adding these pieces to the side of my bookcase to make it a little more decorative and give the impression that it's square. Now, dolls, you can definitely put this little bookcase in the category of a rogue build because I didn't plan anything out. I'm just kind of doing everything and making all the decisions along as I go. And I think it's safe to do that for something simple like a bookcase, but I really wouldn't recommend it on anything else. Now, as I mentioned before, that glue is absolutely fine. I think it's kind of good that it dried up a little bit, so it's a little bit more tacky. And here I am aligning the top or the topper to the bookcase. And in this frame, I'm just aligning it so that it'll extend in the front and to ensure that it's flat in the back so it'll be able to sit flush against the wall. Now in this frame, you can see I put clamps to hold the top on it while it dries and keep everything in place. But while I was waiting for it to dry, I just couldn't resist, dolls. I'm just showing you the sides of it. I know it's not dry, but I want to try it in the room. Now, it is not a best practice to handle your pieces while they're drying. You should leave them alone until they're completely dry. But now that I can see that everything's working out, let me show you what else I did. So my little heat registers are completely dry, so I'm adding a little stain to the coffee stir stick. So this is another instance of me telling you to do as I say and not as I do. It's better to stain things before you glue them, especially when you're staining with real stain because the stains are oily and it can cause the glue to loosen. So while the stain on the heat registers are drying, let me go ahead and add some paint and stain to the bookshelf. Now I'm going to do kind of a glunky, murky undercoat for the bookshelf because I kind of want it to be dark and I want it to look old and salvage. So I'm mixing some of my acrylic black paint and some of this linen colored paint along with some alcohol. And I do that because I want it to dry really fast. I really want it to look, again, salvaged and old and dark because the wood is brand new and it's light. So I really want to give it a deep aged look. Now I can definitely achieve that with the brown paint, but I want to give this a different type of look. So I'm starting out just adding this gray toned paint that I've created. Now I'm trying to be careful painting the base of the bookshelf because I want to stain the top part with natural wood stain. So I'm really trying to focus my attention on adding this base dark color to the body of the bookshelf and not to the top of it. Now, although I don't want to get it on the top, I'm not trying to be particularly neat about this because I want it to make it look aged and built up over time. So I'm just kind of slapping it on here kind of haphazardly, more or less trying to cover all the surface areas and a little in the corners. And I'm using gray because I wanted to have more of a cool color undertone rather than a warm brown. Now, while the paint was drying on the base, I went on to add a couple thin coats of my wood stain to the top part of the bookshelf. Now, when I added the stain, I just kind of went across it a couple times, and I didn't put it on real heavy because I don't want it to be dark. I almost want it to look faded. And after I was satisfied with the coverage of the top, I actually took a piece of cotton cloth and just wiped off the excess. Now, I don't know about you, but it really does, to me, give the impression of an old salvage bookshelf. Maybe they found it in an abandoned house, or somebody was giving it away, or maybe somebody left it out on the curb, and the dolls thought it would be useful to bring it home, clean it up, and use it in the children's reading room. Now, by the time I got to this point, I was almost done, but I did see a few things that I wanted to camouflage. So I used a couple more of my coffee stir sticks to finish off those edges that looked a little raw right along the side. Now, you know, I added the borders to the ends of the bookcase. So this is the front. So I thought that this would actually match the concept using these pieces right along the front. Now, this side of the bookcase was pretty flush and level, so it was easy to add that piece. But when I got over to the other side, the way the coffee stir sticks were assembled, there was a little bit of a bulge right on the edge. Everything wasn't flush, so I had to remedy that. So I started out by trying to use some of my really coarse sandpaper to knock it down. Now, after a couple passes with my sandpaper, I realized it wasn't going to make it come down fast enough, so I just used my craft knife to shave down a couple thin shards of the wood to make it level with the side of the bookshelf, because I needed to be level enough that when I add the coffee stir stick, it'll lay flat. And from this angle, you can clearly see the part that I'm trying to camouflage. Now, I really do like the way that looks. It looks a lot neater and covers up that raw edge to the front of the bookshelf. And one of the main things you want to keep in mind when you're adding these little camouflage pieces is to make sure they're not too long. So make sure the piece that you add isn't longer than the length of the case, because it'll throw off the balance of your piece of furniture. And you can see here in this frame that after I've added it, I'm going to check it for balance. Now that I know that my bookcase is balanced and the glue is just about dry, I'm going to go ahead and add that layer of paint before the paint that I've mixed up dries, because I don't want to have to mix up another batch. Now that I've painted both of the added on little pieces and touched up the ends to make sure everything blends together, I'm going to allow that to dry and go work on the room. So here we are on the 3rd floor of the Rooming House Dollhouse, where the playroom and reading room are. And I had a few square wooden dolls that I had pre-painted and stained to do some finishing in the room. So you can see the floor is laid in, but has not been officially installed. So I'm going to remove it and let you watch me install it. As I mentioned before, I create my floors on brown paper bag templates, which make it very flexible. And I'm going to show you what I mean in a moment. So here I am adding Gorilla Wood glue to the bare floor in the room, covering up that hole that I repaired. Now, the video is kind of sped up, but I'm just showing you how I'm making sure I get the glue all the way in the corners, because you don't want it to be any lifting after you've installed your floor. So now that I have a reasonably even coat of glue on the entire floor, here I am folding up my floor to put it inside. And it was kind of funny. I created it to sit a certain way, and here I am placing it in. And right after I placed it in, I could tell I had laid it in the wrong direction. The other corner was made to sit closer to the door, and after I put it in, I realized that I had done the wrong thing. But the really nice thing about the paper bag template, it's flexible, and it allowed me to just fold it up and take it right back out and turn it around and install it the correct way. So I pulled it out, flipped it around, and I'm installing it the way I had originally designed it to go. And now that I've got my portable floor all centered and laid in place like I want it to be, now it's time for me to put weights on it so that it'll dry nice and flat. Now, there are lots of different things that you can use to weight down your floors and things while they're drying. I just happen to have some random sample pieces of quartz and granite from the countertop section of the home store. And I also have a couple 1, 2, 3 blocks as well. Now, before I walked away to allow everything to dry, I needed to make sure that the door could swing open freely with no obstruction from the floor. And just as I confirmed that the door could open freely, I realized there's a gap down at the threshold and some finishing trim needed around the door frame. So here I added a stained coffee stir stick to fill in the gap around the door frame and a popsicle stick scrap at the threshold. So dolls, here's a quick glance at those screws that I'm trying to camouflage with the heat registers. And they're the screws that secure the hinge that make the roof open and close. And although I placed it, I'm going to add a shadow behind it. So here's the reading room. I've installed the baseboards and even the painted beams. And I'm really tickled at how it turned out. It looks a lot more cozy than I originally imagined. And I've even added the chalkboard and one of the bulletin boards to the wall. Now, if this is your first time watching, I sure am glad you're here. And if you want to see more content like this, go ahead and subscribe. And always look for me on Mondays after 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And make sure you hit your notification bell so you'll be alerted anytime I upload a new video. I sure have enjoyed creating this video for you dolls today. And until next time, I'm looking forward to seeing you right here on Little Gretchen's Workshop. Bye-bye now, dolls.